welcome tech enthusiasts and cyber adventurers to the Fifi Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fifi Show, where we dive and talk all about cutting edge cybersecurity. I'm your host, Shivani, and today we are thrilled to be joined by a very special guest, Taylor, who brings incredible expertise on the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shivani. I'm glad to be here. Really excited to get this podcast recorded, and I really just thank you for inviting me and being able to have this conversation today.
Absolutely. We are also very excited to have you. And AI is such a hot topic right now, especially in cybersecurity. And let's kick things off, by setting the stage on how AI is currently being used in cyber and what makes it such a powerful tool for threat detection.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you've attended any conference or any talk, or if you've even read a white paper or gotten a product demo, really, AI's been around for a long time. ML's been around for a long time. But I think over the last 2 years, especially with the way that social media has taken off, algorithms, hashtags, AI has definitely seemed to be a topic that's been exploding at times.
Right.
We've always had artificial intelligence. Is developed way back. We've definitely developed incremental increases in proficiency of machine learning, neural networks, things like that. But like the intersection of where AI used to live, great references like the movie I, Robot, which is based on a book, right? Like there's always been this concept of artificial intelligence and its takeover, but we're actually seeing like those quantum developments, right, with quantum computing and GPUs and things like that are increasing proficiency. And so naturally what you've seen is threat actors or malicious people start to take advantage of that and take advantage of the use of that type of technology to create exploits or to target organizations or nation states with the use of that technology. So we've also started to adapt that into cybersecurity. So that, like, really, I think that's probably been the biggest reason for the boom as of lately. Not to say that companies didn't have good AI practices or good ML practices in the past, but there's definitely a large emphasis on it right now. So really, like, the intersection has always been there. I think we're just like a lot of the major highways in the United States, we're just expanding it now, right? Like it's always under construction. There's always going to be delays. But we're starting to see we're starting to see a lot of traffic on it. A lot more cars are starting to pass through. Lanes are opening. So yeah, I mean it's always been there. Whenever we talk about threat detection or threat response, right? Depending on the type of software that you're running or the type of investigations that you're running. And I guess I should preface this with my background. I have a large background in endpoint detection and response, serving with two of what they formerly called the 4 big C's. So I was a support engineer and technical account manager for Carbon Black, which has now been successfully went public. Were acquired by VMware, which was that whole thing that's been in the news lately. And I was also with Cybereason, which was another endpoint detection response company. So I have a large emphasis and background in understanding EDR technology, endpoint exploitation, things like that. And then I've done things in the external attack surface space. I've done some threat intelligence, and now I'm doing a security engineering program with a company called Omni Federal. So over the last 12 years, I've focused exclusively on cybersecurity, and making sure that organizations and companies are secure. So this intersection, I've seen it for a very long time, right? We used to call a lot of artificial intelligence like anomaly detection, right? Like, this is out of the norm. I'm going to flag this. And it's like, oh, well, that's technically artificial intelligence because I trained the system to look for this one thing over and over and over again, but now you're highlighting that something's different. So when I said it, that AI and ML's always been around, like, it has. And again, it's just about market boom, and capacity of, terms and conditions being displayed to us. So
no, that's true. Absolutely. Like you talked about, like, we are training to detect anomalies, and it also happened with malware analysis too. Like when we do it, you use the AI and machine learning technologies to, study the malware behavior, or maybe use it in a sandbox technique to understand like what a malware does, study the behavior, and you'll learn from them. So AI is there as well. And not to forget, like, in phishing, people are now using AI in phishing too. So I think yes, that's correct. AI is there, and in movies, if you see The Matrix,
yes,
so AI has been since The Matrix, and I was too young at that time. I was so small. I might be a child back then. So just imagine, it is since there. It's like it's booming. I think it's like the bubble burst, and people suddenly like AI. It's in the air. So
yeah,
people forget, like, it has been there, and you might be using it without knowing it, and now you feel like it's a buzzword, so they just want to put it like everywhere. So
yeah.
it is a game changer in so many ways, that and it's fascinating in how it is enhancing such capabilities, and it is enhancing security practices, and it is enhancing your power to streamline processes too at a level. Now,
100%. We, a lot of decision making. I mean, now that you're talking about, right, like, we've always had this idea of run books, right? SOPs. That in itself is a type of artificial intelligence, because we're establishing these processes. And what used to be, okay, I read from this excerpt, I see this output, now I input this file, right? Like, all of that's being automated for us. And yes, some of it is programming, but some of it is automated decision making based on responsive output. And that helps a lot. Cutting down time for your security operations center to triage alerts or to understand the threat vector.
Absolutely, that's what, like, I was wanting to get a deeper insight into too, because there are manual methods which are available, and there are traditional methods to do the incident response. Like with the help of AI, you automate so many things. Like, you don't have to like manually do it. It's like it tells you, and then okay, I have detected an anomaly in my infrastructure. Now I can do an RCA myself.
Yep.
So, like, now, what do you think? Like, there is always a different kind of an advantage when you're using an automation. What do you feel about that? How does
absolutely.
this helps?
Automation is huge. And automation doesn't circumvent the need for human presence, right? Because there's always nuance in understanding certain things, right? One of the things that I learned when I was doing threat intelligence years ago is AI has the ability to interpret natural language, right? So you can set up an AI tool to do conversion. But one of the things that I learned is the understanding of like the natural language being spoken. One of the key terms that I used to see pop up a lot was the Russian word for potato. And I never understood like why this continued to pop. But the Russian word for potato was being used in a way that it was actually talking about security incident. So whether it was like credit cards, or whether it was like breach, this term was replaced a lot of times. So being in the threat intelligence field, like, I learned that there were natural word replacements that artificial intelligence could pick up and could translate, but it didn't understand like the implication of how it was being used and why that term existed in the sentence. So yes, there's automation for sure. And automation, I know that everyone's worried that AI is going to replace all of them, right? But AI can only go as far as the information that we're feeding into it.
True.
So while we have the ability to automate and to respond faster for what I would say is like very straightforward decision making, there are still caveats to that that we have to account for.
Okay.
And human behavior is obviously number one. So automation increases efficiency and mean time to respond. Absolutely. And it eliminates what I would say is a lot of straightforward false positives, but it also has the potential to create some false negatives as well, if you don't understand the nuance. So making sure that while automation exists and AI is doing what you expect it to, ensuring that you're feeding the system the right data to make those decisions is probably key in continuing efficiency, right? Like there's immediate efficiency gained by turning on a smart alert filter or something that has the capability to determine threat analysis, but continuing to feed and to validate that information so that the AI model that is making the decisions has more information to more accurately depict the scenarios that occur.
Absolutely. And like the point where you said, like, it can detect the Russian words and, they don't know the implication. That's where the human element will fit in because they will need to exploit it. It's like same as, when we do pen testing, the tool will tell you, and there can be like 10 false positives. You would need to exploit it, go further, see what's the impact and implication, and then report it. Same way, the EDRs also work the same way. They will tell you, but you need to check it. It will be sometimes the alert can be a false positive. So that's an anomaly. We need to factor that in that. And it's amazing. Like the ability of AI is amazing. And the data sets that we feed in and identifying all the anomalies. Like it's same like what you feed is what you get. Like even in the threat intel landscape also, you will have to tell like what are my indicators of compromise, what you should be looking at, and then then it will tell you like what it is. So I think it works similarly the same way because I think it can identify so quickly. But here is a question like I think a lot about people who are curious about can AI be effectively defend against these sophisticated attacks like we don't know, like ransomware or zero-day exploits. How does AI learn and adapt to these new attacks? So how can AI prevent us from these things? Because people use AI for both ways. They can use AI to put a ransomware in your system, but can AI also help you prevent through that?
Yeah, so I mean, emerging threats are always a major concern that keep people up at night, right? I was fortunate enough to experience Log4j and being on a team that was doing the response to Log4j. And what was very interesting to me is the way that some of the AI tools picked up the way that data was being fed on the Log4j attempts, right? AI successfully detected a lot of anomalies in those web requests. They, and I talk about, AI in the way that, certain people have next-gen firewalls, or they have, content filters, or, they're watching application execution and seeing, anomalies in that. The way that AI, I want to say, from my experience, had a very successful defense posture against Log4j. And again, I think Log4j is also somewhat of an anomaly because that exploit actually lived for a while. It wasn't, there wasn't an active POC. So while the exploit of the technology existed, that's my only caveat is because like the Log4j vulnerability existed for so long. I don't know if there was natural system learning over time on like the expectation of that library, and then it saw the anomaly and was able to detect it, right. Or if AI has been that advanced that it saw these differentiating changes and like the attempts of data exfil or data right. collection. So while Log4j is a great example, it also seems somewhat anomalous just because of how long the detect or that exploit actually lived. So in my experience, like AI against like an emerging threat like that, a CVE 10, it was very successful and it did a very good job of highlighting deficiencies within our posture and gave us the ability to rapidly understand our threat landscape and what was being queried, so that we could take a defensive posture and update our code.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it was just like, I was saying, like if we feed that data, like indicators of compromise, these are the certain threats that we can be exposed to. So it will definitely look for that. But I was also thinking about like what about humans? Like if you remember this MGM attack that happened, it was happened by a human. So AI can't do that. So it was like human social engineering. Like he just called the help desk and boom, you are into the infrastructure and done. You are done. So training employees is also one part. I think AI can do its job by human, but human has to also happen like, the error-free.
Yeah, training. And I mean, I actually watched one of your previous episodes where you were talking about some of like the AI voice responses and things like that and how people are falling for I don't want to say scams because they're not necessarily yes, they are scams. I give them a little bit more credit than that. I think that they are a type of threat actor. They're not on the level of like nation state or hacktivists or anything like that. But to me, like they are a threat actor or a threat vector that we haven't given a lot of response or allocation to. So I agree, like there is human training that needs to be done on like the identification of AI voice response, SMS attacks. I'm trying to remember. I believe the
USPS messages.
Yeah, the USPS messages. And then there's also other things like MFA bombing, right? I think it was Zendesk or another company. One of their employees, he was just getting MFA bombed, and eventually just kind of, I think, ended up accepting on accident this MFA request, and then they were able to gain access. But all of that, like, that wasn't someone just typing on a keyboard. Like that was an AI program or a generative AI or ML program that continuously fed him information to where he got overloaded, and then that human element kicked in and he was like, oh, I'm just tired of this, like let me log in and see, and that led to a breach. So AI is definitely being used against us and for us with emerging threats. Human capital or human asset is still our biggest concern.
Absolutely. And most of the attacks, if you see, like there will be many in which human element would be there and will be there, because we are susceptible to certain things, and we feel like we think in a different emotional way, and sometimes it's very difficult. You become vulnerable to an extent because you will be like, okay, maybe this is true, because and that what happens is sometimes you lose interest, you lose trust, and maybe you gain trust, and it's very hard for you. And usually people, those who are targeted, maybe, they check for those elderly people, or maybe that one employee who feels, which is very disgruntled from his organization, and that specific target would be selected, and then I am going to get him. So I think we also need to adapt to this, because I think adaptability is a very powerful asset that a human can do. And
Yeah.
it's like we can't foresee like what is coming to us, but at least when it comes to us, we should be able to gauge. I think that is important.
100%. And one of the things that that really leads me to is like, there are, oh my god, there are so many cybersecurity products out there, right? But one of the things that, like, as you were talking, that really flags to me is like, a lot of the companies that do like DLP identification, or
Right.
they understand like UABA, user, oh, I can't remember, UEBA, the entire thing, but behavior analytics, right? User and entity behavior analytics, right? We talk about that a lot, and we have to understand that, because to your point, right, like a sophisticated AI attack against a disgruntled employee is an extremely vulnerable posture for a company, right? Because to your point, we are emotional creatures. We emotionally overshare. We emotionally undershare. We post political views. We post who we work for, where we work out of, when we're on vacation, when we're not on vacation, right? Even as security practitioners, right? We're like, don't share your location, right? But then, like, you're talking to your spouse, and your spouse is like, hey, why aren't you on Life 360? Like, I was worried about you. And you're like, oh, those app permissions. And then they guilt you into like, what if you were in a car accident? Like, how would I know where you are? And it's like, okay, well, like, there's some validity to that, right? So these UEBA companies and human incessant sharing, that leads to like a large scale issue, which also means we have to be able to successfully respond and identify that and have appropriate incident response, right? So being able to highlight behavior, or highlight anomalous behavior in your security posture within your organization is huge. We can talk about external threats all day long, and how AI understands, depending on the tools that you're using, right? Like if you're doing an external attack surface, and you're a financial services company, right? Like there's a certain set of APTs that to be on the lookout. To block certain IPs. We're not, still in the day where we're setting up firewall policies and we're blocking, all of, the Alibaba IPs or, Chinese Federation IPs, right? Like that we ran out of IPs to block. Everything changes.
Absolutely.
So AI helps us with that, right? But AI internally, with your internal policies and your employees, that is where I think we need to make significant progress, because external threats, I do believe that AI and machine learning is doing a good job trying to keep up with emerging threats and keep up with cutting edge technology. Threats are going to happen, right? But making sure that your incident response policy internally is utilizing the right technology and the right processes and the right frameworks to identify and mitigate threats. That's like, I think that's where we have to have significant increase, and stop, just this blocking and tackling, and get into like root cause identification, get into like preemptive understanding, because while yes, there is privacy as a person, as an employee, there are certain actions that raise concern. When you upload a lot of documents to your personal G Drive, or you start forwarding emails to your personal email address, a lot of times like that is a symptom of an employee getting ready to tender their resignation or believe that they're about to be let go, or that they could be. I've been taking some like Fortinet trainings and things like that, just trying to recertify some of my credentials. And one of them talks about like the different internal personas of like pawns and goofs, things like that. But like those behaviors, that's where we have to start to identify it and start to leverage AI, I think, a lot more efficiently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are talking about like this threat detection. Once the AI have detected this threat, so how does it streamline that process? Like, from detection to response and then to mitigation. Like, if you can walk us through a little bit of a process, like how does it do it?
Yeah. Look, since we're already talking about users, let's talk about users. I love users. Users make the world go round, right?
Absolutely.
So, situations that I've seen. Large number of uploads to a personal G drive or exfiltrating data, right?
Yeah.
So there's a detection out there for that. Says, hey, this user's doing this, right? So at first it's an alert, right?
Yeah.
You go and you review the alert and you're like, this threshold's kind of small. And then you start kind of reviewing the metadata of the file that was uploaded. Oh, well, this was actually like it was an Excel spreadsheet of Girl Scout cookies sold, right? And you're like, not really important, right? So now you have the ability to go back into your tool and talk about, okay, yes, I need to know about large numbers of data being exfiltrated, but maybe there's something in our documents or what's created within our boundary that we can signify that's more important than just personal documents being made. So now you're training the system to look for it. Hey, now I'm going to look for like this DLP identifier, or depending on what tools you have, I am going to look in that document and see, is there any PII? Are there contract numbers? Is there information like key sensitive terms, project names, things like that listed within those documents that is now going to create much more than alert. So now I've trained the system not to look for that personal data, but to look for company sensitive data. So now I had an initial alert, I disposed of that. Now I have a more fine-tuned alert, and now I know that user's still uploading data. So now that account's already been flagged to me, that user's known, and now I know that there's sensitive data. So now that alert triggers a workflow to start generating a body of evidence. What's that data? What's that data being exfiltrated? So depending on if you're using like Google Shop or something else, like you can write queries to start looking at the data within the mailbox and the share drives and see what's being exfilled. So now you're starting to create a body of evidence based off that alert. That body of evidence is then used to be scanned to see, are they accessing data that they shouldn't to, that is outside of their organization or their responsibilities? Could that data potentially cause fiscal harm to the organization? Could it cause harm to an executive or to another person? Is this a blackmail attempt? Is this a privacy violation? Is this source code violation that they could potentially sell to a competitor? So now that you've got all of that information, the AI system starts to investigate that data, see what it is. Now that user's classified as insider threat or something of that nature. And now you've got the body of evidence, the user classification, and the log of activity. And now you have like a fully qualified like playbook that you can use to, all right, now I'm going to disable this user. I'm going to lock their share drive. I'm going to prevent them from sending emails outbound. And now like that basically history or the profile of this user is now going to go to the security team or to the CISO, or if like there's a board of trustees or something like that, to make like a human resources decision. But you've streamlined all of that because just by fine tuning the alert of like, hey, I don't care about Girl Scout cookie orders, to hey, you're actually like exporting payroll data and this internal project classification PowerPoint, right? Now you can't send emails. Now you're just sitting at your desk like, I guess I got caught, guys.
Yeah.
But you did all of that without actually having to click or to run queries yourself and then generate the report and then present the report. Now all of that's done for you. You have an immediate response, and you have an escalation policy of like, this ran, this run book executed, this data was collected. Now we can present everything, including findings to decision makers.
Absolutely. I think it really reduces that response time also, so that people who are reading these alerts can also follow those processes, the SOPs that they have to go through, and it really reduces that that laborious work that you have to do. I think that's what AI do to you. And there are so many powerful tools, like you mentioned earlier also, but I think with those tools, there are certain risks also involved. So I would want you to tell us, like, what are some of the risks, and, what are their limitations? Like, I've heard about concerns like, adversarial AI and, potential over reliance on automation. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, ghost IT, or ghost SaaS apps that are using SAML or SSO authentication and just mining data. That's a huge concern, right? The ease of signing up and using products is both a great benefit and a great risk to us. The amount of different integrations I can do with my Gmail as like my authorization and authentication to access things is amazing and absolutely nerve-wracking. Because like you said, like there are concerns with the amount of SaaS applications that we're using that are collecting information that can be used against you. And so one of my concerns is people not understanding what they're signing up for, because there are adversarial AIs. There are so many calendar applications, it's not funny, right? There's these time blocking calendar applications that will look at your calendar and move meetings and add deadlines, and then based on the email you get, if there's the word urgent, it will reprioritize, right? Like, that's amazing. But the fact is, they're reading your email now, right? They're looking for key terms, and then they're adjusting your calendar. So if someone was to breach that or to use that negatively against you, now they have full access to your inbox. They have access to your calendar. So it's not just about like the written communication between parties, but now there's actual, like, if you use Google Meets, right? And there's no Google Meets password. There's the potential that there are like note-taking apps and things like that like Gong and others that record calls, and maybe you don't know, your company doesn't use Gong, but maybe the other company does, right? And sometimes like you just get into the meeting and you start talking, not realizing there's a recorder, and nobody asks the question. Everyone assumes it's somebody else's. And so now you've got data exfiltration that you weren't even accounting for, because you signed up for a calendar application and it installed a recorder. So that is major concerns for me. Adversarial AI is a big concern, more so on like the generative AI side for me, right? Because there's always checks and balances for like your typical AI ML and understanding like those categorical risks. Generative AI is where I think the biggest concern is, because it continuously adapts and learns as you feed it information. And if adversaries are feeding it at such a rapid pace, and you're working to defend at a rapid pace, and there's no data validation,
Absolutely.
they're gonna find a way to overrun the system or overrun the logic, and give you the responses that you don't need or that they intend for you to have.
Just imagine the kind of catastrophic effect it can have on any decision making capabilities, or we are training the AI machine learning to feed the data responsibly, and with these adversarial AI poisoning of information, so it can really do harm, big harm to everybody.
And again, like, it is a system, so there's no emotional connection of producing bad results, right? Like, would just categorically say bad results, whether it's adversarial or misinformation or targeted dissemination of politics, even, right? Like, I have seen people rebuild generative AI models and feed it like one side of a political argument, and then you go to ask a question against it that goes against like the political feedings, and like the responses are almost aggressive. So if you can just do that on your home machine, right, and you take that and you amplify that by these APT groups that have large scale infrastructure that are feeding these different types of generative AIs, like, you can only imagine the type of results that are going to be produced. And to battle against that it's going to be extremely difficult, especially if you don't have any data validation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important perspective. Like, especially when human element is involved, we have to consider the ethical concerns too. And it is all about data and privacy of data, and AI is being used to exploit it in either of the way, for good and for bad. So we have to balance that benefit. We have to factor the risk of AI, and we also have to be very critical moving forward. And it's again sums up to human, like how we are handling AI, because ethical use of AI is challenging. People can use it for good, people can use it for bad. Like you gave an example, like, training AI on one side of a political content, and then, asking answers for it. So just imagine, what do we see that in future? Like, what will it hold for us? So that's for us to think. So ethical use of AI is a very important topic. Like, one should always be careful with, like, when we're dealing with AI. AI simplifies work. AI do a lot of things for you. It makes your process easy. But are we ethical with it? So
that's great. Like, that's a great perspective. What I will say is, while I think we're behind a little bit, the I think it's AAA, the Algorithmic Accountability Act, which is one of like the US AI regulations. I believe it's still in a proposed state, if I'm not mistaken. But it talks about, having regulations and submission of, bodies of evidence, and the ability to force generative AI developers to reduce, bias and discrimination, but also increase transparency in the way that the systems are operating. I think that's huge. And I know that the US has a couple of different things, like the AAA, and then the UK. I know that they have a national AI strategy, and then obviously they updated their DPA, I believe, in 2018. Or the DPA was formed in 2018. I can't remember the exact dates on it, but it essentially governs from like a national level of how companies within that region must operate with AI. And then there's obviously like voluntary frameworks like NIST and things like that,
Right.
online safety bills. So I think that we're heading in the right direction to hopefully
Absolutely.
increase transparency, understand decision making, and
Mm.
reduce some of the risk. But like we've said the entire conversation, humans are
Yeah.
human, and that's our biggest risk. And
True.
people actively decide not to follow laws and things like that already.
Yeah.
So we have to understand the boundaries that we're operating in, and give everyone the ability to make the best decision possible. Bless you.
Thank you.
It is. I'm not surprised you're sneezing. With us both being in North Carolina, we've seen the temperature fluctuate the last 2 weeks from like 85
I
to
know.
30.
Just imagine morning it was 45. So
Yeah.
it's playing with us. So it's fall on and off. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
So it's there.
Yeah. The weather is very much like the AI right now. It's up and down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with all that standards, I also remember, like, I am from compliance background, so we got introduced to this ISO compliance for AIs, and it's something I think 42,000 or 42,001. It's for like it gives you a framework, like a standard for AI application, how you should be. It's like set of rules, and same OWASP. They also came out with their top 10 issues for large language models. I think we have regulations in place. There's so many, and people know like this is the way forward. Like if you say Middle East, Dubai, they always host events around AI, ethical use of AI. Now GITEX is happening over there. They have this AI, IoT technology conclave like at a massive level. This they use it. Like even they have like police stations which are like unmanned. Like no people, you will be fascinated. I saw and I was like, is it possible? Like, police station, there is no human. You just go, you do your work, and done.
Yeah.
There's no human. So just imagine where we are going to. I think I can see flying cars in like few years.
I'm not gonna say no to a flying car, but I've also seen enough accidents on I-40 to know that that's also scary. But I mean, to your point, right? Like AI, and we haven't even hit on like prediction or anything like that with artificial intelligence or, but like I think about that, right? And like predictable actions based on human behavior or scenario evaluation. We talk about that, but think about like drones monitoring the air looking for crime or potential crime, right? Like those are it's crazy.
I remember the show Upload on Amazon Prime, self-driving cars, and a drone came in like with the screen and the police officer, like you were speeding, and then the car says, I was not there, I was rebooting myself, it was driving manually. If you have seen that show, so it's there, like people are already thinking it's now. But if you have seen Back to Future, we already had flying cars in Back to Future. So my favorite
I definitely
movie.
want that skateboard. That hover skateboard.
I know. The last scene with the train and that skateboard, like, my favorite movie. I love it. Whenever I have to be, I will do a marathon on all the 3 parts. I really love that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love it. My marathon movie though is still Harry Potter. Every fall. And I firmly believe that AI is just magic, and technology is just wizardry at this point.
Absolutely. So Taylor, thank you so much for sharing such amazing insights with us today. I had a lovely conversation with you, and thank you so much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to this episode coming out, and kind of staying in touch with you, especially as this grows. I know that you've been recording a lot of episodes, so just excited to be here, and can't wait to see you on your podcast journey, and what you do next.
Thank you so much. I still have a lot of things to learn from you too. You're also a great podcast host. I think security matters, or what is it?
It is Lockdown with Kayla and Taylor.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And thank you to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of The Fifi Show. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the future episodes, where we'll continue exploring the latest in cybersecurity. For now, stay safe. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.